On today's show, it's a bonus Locked On Sens after a pair of professional tryout offers were announced. We'll get into what Nikolay Kulemin and Calen Addison can bring to camp. That and more on today's Locked On Sens.
I'm Jake Sanderson.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory, alone for now because Brandon Pillar's on his way to Calgary. He has no idea that Kulemin and Calen Addison are now members of upcoming training camp, which gets underway September 19th, will be the first day of on-ice sessions. However, the Sens are teasing us with photos that the captain's practices are underway at the CTC. Photos of Josh Norris, Tim Stützle, Thomas Chabot, and Jake Sanderson going up today. Still waiting on Linus Ullmark's new equipment. That's going to be a great day as a hashtag goalie-friendly show. Speaking of goalies, we actually have Seth Tupal from Locked On Wild later on. We'll get into Calen Addison. He was a prospect, once a top prospect for the Wild. What was the deal with him? Why didn't he pan out? And does Seth think that there is an NHL talent still there in Calen Addison? We'll get to that a little bit later in the show. Nikolay Kulemin, though, that has to steal the headlines. Come on. A former 30-goal scorer for the Toronto Maple Leafs back in, 2010? He played for the Leafs from 2008 and then left the NHL in 2018 when he had a few years with the New York Islanders after his time in Toronto, where, by the way, when he scored 30 goals, who was his winger? Clark MacArthur. Could this be another Sens redemption arc where they did it with Dion Phaneuf and Clark MacArthur? Could Noah and Gregor and Nikolay Kulemin be the second coming of that? I wouldn't bet on it per se, but it is a funny thought to have because Nikolay Kulemin was once considered a pretty solid two-way player in the National Hockey League, but at 38 years old, I don't think we have to spend too much time on if he's going to make the NHL roster. I think this is an extra body in training camp. He's got familiarity with members of the staff. We know Dave Poulin was in Toronto the entirety of Kulemin's time there, as well as Steve Staios, albeit in a player development role. More so Dave Poulin. I think this has kind of his fingerprints all over it. We also know that Kulemin was training this summer at Matty Nichols' gym, Page 6 Systems, I believe it's called, on Instagram, and there were photos tagged of Kulemin training out there. So he's going to come into camp prepared. Is it really a favor? I guess so, to get him out on the ice. Senators' first preseason game, by the way, is in Toronto on September 22nd, so I assume that's a cool moment that could be circled on Kulemin's calendar, but it just feels strange that a guy who's been in the KHL for 6 seasons is going to get a look at an NHL camp at age 38. He had 25 points in 46 games last year with Salavat Ufa. Let's go with Ufa. That's a nice way to put it. I'll leave that in there, though, as it's a little different solo. We miss Pilsy here on the show, but he'll be back tomorrow. We've got a Ring of Honor already recorded. And then on Monday, we actually recorded a show talking about all the players that have moved on. Almost an unofficial start to the Locked On Sens season previews, which will be coming throughout the next month as we inch towards October 10th. I'm trying to keep the time flying by with some nice videos on Twitter. We're posting one a day, just nostalgic moments. And I've got 5 more in the hopper already set for the next 5 days. So make sure you're following there. You can also find us everywhere you get podcasts. We are free and available on YouTube. Calen Addison's more interesting, right? Like, I think we've covered Kulemin, okay? It's funny. We had all had to Google where was he playing. Haven't heard that name in quite some time. But with Calen Addison, we saw him quarterbacking a top power play in the NHL this past season. I had to pause after top power play. I should say top power play unit in San Jose, who we know really struggled last year to score goals and have any sort of semblance of a top power play unit. So Calen Addison had plenty of opportunity with San Jose. Wasn't brought back. In 60 games last year in San Jose, 12 points, 1 goal, and a minus 35. Now, plus minus, we'll get into with Seth. It's not everything at all, but it is kind of a bit eye-opening when you're that low in considerable years. Like the year before, his last full season in Minnesota, he was a minus 17, worst on the team by 2. So it seems like he's very offensive-minded, but struggles in his own zone. He's also undersized, 5'11", under 180 pounds, or around that, we'll say. I'm getting Eric Brandstrom vibe, so Pilsy not being here might be a blessing, but we'll see what happens with Calen Addison. I should mention that episode on Monday, obviously, has been recorded with Pilsy yesterday, so you're not going to get, wow, Kulemin, Addison, where do they fit? We omit them, of course. Now, I don't think either of these guys are going to make the NHL team. To me, this is to push Jacob Bernard-Docker and to a lesser extent, Travis Hamonic as a right shot defenseman. We're not sold on you as an organization, right? Prove to us that you can carry the mail. That's kind of the message I think that you're sending, because Calen Addison, I believe, is 1 year, if not the same age as Jacob Bernard-Docker, both 2018 picks. Addison went in the second round, 53rd overall, had an exceptional junior career with the Lethbridge Hurricanes for the most part, where he was almost a point per game through 3 seasons there. You might remember him from that 2020 Team Canada World Juniors gold medal team, that wild game with Russia in the finals. Calen Addison had 9 points at that World Juniors. Felt like the sky was the limit. He was one of those guys making a name for himself in the prospect world, but just hasn't really panned out at the NHL level. And he's losing opportunities now with his 3rd NHL jersey he'll be putting on with the Ottawa Senators. So it'll be really interesting to see how Calen Addison fits at training camp. And we'll see if the Senators even have a tough decision to make with him. 24 years old. I might have already mentioned that. So he's in that place where if he wants to make himself an everyday NHLer, now's the time. And for Kulemin, could be a fun redemption story, but I'm not setting my clock to him making the Senators opening night roster. That's the news today, and there could be more news tomorrow with a Senators prospect, Gabriel Eliasson. A lot of thoughts about where he could end up this upcoming season. Nothing is for certain, but yesterday, speaking to the media, Cedar Rapids USHL coach said he's not coming there. So that takes that option off the table. He was the 2nd overall pick in the USHL draft, and that was before the NHL draft. So you got to think the Senators might have something to do with Eliasson taking a different path forward. As of now, he's still committed to the University of Michigan for the fall of 2025, but there's still lots of time between now and then. If he does go to the Ontario Hockey League, he loses all eligibility for playing at Michigan. So it is a big decision. That's what I'll say. It's a big decision for a big man, 6'8", still 17 years old until Monday. Gabriel Eliasson, if you want to learn more about him, he was on the podcast earlier this summer after being taken in the 2nd round of the 2024 NHL draft. All right, that's our bonus Locked On Sens. Please vote tomorrow on Twitter at Sens Central for the Ring of Honor draft, the biggest what ifs in Senators history. For now, I'm going to throw it over to my conversation with Seth Tupal to dive deeper into Calen Addison. And of course, I had to ask him about Filip Gustavsson after a roller coaster Jekyll and Hyde first 2 years after that offseason trade with the Senators for Cam Talbot. That's coming up next. You're listening to a bonus Locked On Senators, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. If you need last-minute tickets at the lowest prices, you need GameTime, because GameTime has the lowest price guarantee. If you find the same tickets in the same section for less, you'll get credit at 110% of the difference. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. GameTime is your spot for tickets for sports, theater, comedy, music, and more. Just go check them out. And now GameTime Picks is here, and that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. You can filter through the fluff and only show incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste any time searching for thousands of tickets. Get to GameTime now. And GameTime also has panoramic views from your seats. I love knowing where I'm going to be when I walk in to the CTC. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and because you're a listener of Locked On Sens, you get $20 off your first purchase. Locked On NHL, that's LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code Locked On NHL, $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time. For a deeper look at Calen Addison, we go to Locked On Wild host Seth Tupal. Seth, good friend of the show. Great to see you. How are you doing today, man?
Ross, it is good to be back on the Locked On Senators airwaves. It's been far too long, and it's funny how this works. The moment I saw that our main subject matter was going on today, just popped a tweet to Locked On Sens and said, "Sup, boys? How we doing today?"
2
And
minutes later, we're on the air.
Here we
That's
are.
how we do it here. Breaking news, Locked On. I know, look, it's PTOs. We don't even know if Calen Addison or you just heard me talking about Nikolai Kulemin are going to make the Sens. But it is good to know what's coming to camp, and this is a player with plenty of NHL experience. Finished last season with the San Jose Sharks, but was in the Minnesota Wild organization for 3.5 seasons. So what's the fan thoughts in Minnesota? How's Calen Addison perceived?
You know, it's interesting because Addison came in and really hit the ground running from a points perspective because he had so much success quarterbacking the power play, the Minnesota Wild power play in his rookie season. He came close to setting the franchise record for rookie points. But there always was this circle back to the other side of the game because there were some times, to be honest, at which he just was really not great defensively. And so it's always that half of the glass. He was really good offensively, and he just seemed to have a knack for being able to set things up and really to help push play, which is something that at that point the Minnesota Wild's D-core really needed, but just didn't really give you much of anything on the defensive side. And it led to many games in which you're talking about a player recording like a -3 or a -4. And I know plus minus isn't the best indicator of performance, but at the end of the day, being on the ice and responsible for a lot of goals for opponents is something that a coaching staff is going to get you to try to improve. And so this happened a little bit before he ended up eventually getting traded to San Jose. The coaching staff in end of year meetings with Addison asked him to, go talk to Jared Spurgeon, Minnesota Wild captain, who's a pretty darn good defenseman himself. He's not the tallest of defensemen either. So the thought was that it would be a good player to talk to about what he needs to do to kind of improve the defensive side of his game. And lo and behold, later, Jared Spurgeon was asked about that, and he said, "No, he never came to me for any sort of advice." And that's your captain, that's the captain of your team, and somebody who is supposed to be able to help those young players, help them develop, help them figure out how to cut it as an NHL defenseman. And so that, I think, was a frustrating point for the Minnesota Wild coaching staff. Was all you got to do is go. We just want you to kind of go to him for advice to try to figure out this other side of the game, and never ended up doing that. And so when you have a guy whose really only asset is being able to help on the power play, Bill Guerin had a notable quote right around the time that the Wilds were looking at trying to re-sign Ryan Reeves. He said, you can't have specialists on the roster. And that's basically what Calen ended up being. He played, I believe it was one game as an actual forward when the Wild were short on bodies near the end of his tenure. He played one game there, but barely played, didn't factor into anything really at all. And so it just comes down to something that I think a lot of young players have to figure out, is how to become more than just like a one-trick pony. Figure out ways to impact other facets of the game. And, he wasn't factoring in on the penalty kill at all. As a smaller defenseman, he did tend to kind of get moved around by bigger bodies. You got to find other ways to impact the game. And so he goes to San Jose. There was a pretty good outcry about that trade, that the Wilds gave up on him too quickly. He was okay with San Jose, but some of those defensive metrics were the same. And so it just came down to, I think, not being able to really add more tools to the tool shed. And just like Bill Guerin said, you can't be a specialist these days on NHL rosters.
And Addison was provided the opportunity of being that power play one quarterback. I reached out to JD Young, who you host the Locked On NHL Tuesday Western Conference show. He's also the host of Locked On Sharks, where Addison finished the year. And his quote was saying, meh, he was fine. Says he was given that role I mentioned, but not sure where he fits on the Sens. Could be a nice AHL addition. All offense, little defense, as Seth just said, but the offense just isn't good enough to have that missing piece on the other end. When you bring up that Spurgeon story, I look at it at plus minus. You mentioned not the greatest of indicators, but when you're egregiously below everyone else on your team, or you look at it game by game, there's a lot where you're out there consistently -3, -4. Well, the year you mentioned, Calen Addison was a team worst -17. Next worst was -9. So that's a pretty big gap. Jared Spurgeon was plus 32 on the same team. So this isn't a San Jose situation where we can look at that -38 last year for Calen Addison and maybe have some questions about who he's on the ice with, the situations that he was in. But you're saying it's a longer term issue. And when you're 5'11", 173 pounds, like he's listed, you have to be elite if you're going to just be an offensive player. So in a perfect world, though, if he's going to play on a team, you'd probably pair him with a more physical, tough defenseman. And right now it looks like Tyler Kleven's going to be that on the third pair for the Ottawa Senators. We got to see him live. He was in the lineup when Sens were in Minnesota last April. But what's your thought process? Is this a guy that, from what you've seen of him over an extended period of time, that he can cut it in a top 6 role at the NHL level?
I tend to lean towards no, and hearing some of JD's thoughts and having pretty much the same things echoed that happened in Minnesota leads me to a guy who, maybe isn't, I don't want to say not willing to, but not able to make the necessary changes to be able to cut it as a regular NHL defenseman. Because look, there are plenty of defensemen in the NHL that are not great defensively, but the things that you absolutely can't do is just get lost in front of the net. And we saw plenty of that where you'd see offensive players making plays, and you see one wild defenseman or two wild defensemen just kind of standing around, and you're like, who was that? Like, just go try to make a play. Like, I'll never dog somebody if they go try to make a play and it doesn't work out, because you're trying to make a play. You're trying to make something happen, and it either works or it doesn't. But I saw a lot of instances in which you see like a 2-on-1 and somebody in front of the net just does not do anything, and that allows both forwards to just set up shop and do their thing. And so in a perfect world, I would say if you had a really, really solid defensive defenseman to be able to handle basically all the responsibilities of that pairing, maybe it could work. But at the end of the day, he's probably more like an AHL depth guy. Or honestly, I don't know if this doesn't pan out, if maybe he just plays overseas or plays in Canada or something like that. But my guess is that the days of being an NHL regular probably are long gone.
Plays in Canada? What, you think he's going to play beer league?
Something. I'm really intrigued to see how this turns out, but if things don't really change, doesn't seem likely to turn into anything new.
Well, at 24 years old, I'm sure he's feeling the pressure now, changing organizations for a third time, albeit a PTO, but he's going to wear his third NHL jersey in the last 2 years. So you're starting to run out of chances, and it's interesting to see because Ottawa could use that offensive-minded third-pair defenseman in a depth role. A lot of people wanted Kevin Shattenkirk on a PTO or Justin Schultz. Those types of players were still available. They opt with a younger player than that, less NHL experience, albeit the seasons in Minnesota and last year 60 games with San Jose. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with Calen Addison when we get to camp. Can't chat with Seth Tupal, host of Locked On Wild, without talking a little hashtag Sens Abroad. Couple summers ago, we had the Cam Talbot for Philip Gustavsson trade. As Bob McKenzie once famously said, the trade was 1-for-1. Cam Talbot's long moved on. Philly franchise, as we affectionately know him as, had almost a Jekyll and Hyde 2 seasons where he was elite, getting Vezina votes 2 years ago, and then a below 900 save percentage last season. Where's the fan base at with Filip Gustavsson, and what are your expectations for him next season?
It's interesting. There have been early on in the offseason, there were a lot of trade rumors because Marc-Andre Fleury re-upped with the Wild, and the Wild also have Jesper Wallstedt down in Iowa, that he continues to look like somebody that is probably deserving of some regular time at the NHL level. So with 3 goalies, what do you do? And so there were a lot of, well, let's trade Filip Gustavsson because he's one of the only pieces on this roster that doesn't have trade protection. But my long-standing belief has been I would rather have Filip Gustavsson with this team next year with Jesper to help kind of lead him along in the final year of his deal than to trade Gus, to have Fleury and Wallstedt for this season, have Fleury retire, and then Jesper's the only thing that you have in the goalie room after this coming season. I feel like that's probably a short-sighted move by this organization to make just for the sake of getting some of that mentor time. If you really want that to be the case, bring Fleury back as an advisor or something next season to where he can be in that goalie room every day and can talk those guys through it. For Gus, I feel like his season really torpedoed thanks to 2 pretty brutal months of the season. He had some really great stretches. And so for him, I think it comes down to just trying to get back on top after the league got a little bit of a book on him. That season in which he was like a top 5 for the Vezina despite not being an actual finalist. The league didn't have a ton of film on him. And so he was able to do his thing, and the league was trying to kind of feel out what was the best way to attack him. This past season, they had all the film, and they were able to pick a couple of different areas that led to a lot of goals against. And so for him, it just comes down to kind of figuring out those weak spots and trying to shore that up. I think he still is an above average type goalie. He may not be what he was 2 years ago, but I don't think he's as bad as he was this past year. And goalies are weird, man. Like it's highly volatile, especially in this age of all the scoring that we see at the NHL level. Like you can have a really good goalie one year that just can't figure it out the next. And so I err on the side of patience with a guy who is, I think, 26. And this is going to be his 3rd full season of NHL play. Like it takes a while to figure it out sometimes, and you got to just roll with the waves, and most importantly, not make decisions that set you back because you bail on a guy too early.
Well said, Seth. Always appreciate your insight. For more from Seth Tupal, you can go listen to Locked On Wild. You can find it everywhere you get podcasts. And as I mentioned, every Tuesday, the Western Conference edition of Locked On NHL. Seth, already looking at the calendar, it's going to be a post-Christmas meetup, the Sens and Wild in Minnesota on December 29th. We'll chat with you right before, if not sooner. Always appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Ross. As always, I enjoy it. And let's line up a crossover here before the season gets going.
Hope you enjoyed that chat with Seth. Such a good guy. Hope you do go like, subscribe, and check out Locked On Wild for more. Final thoughts from me. Just really excited for the Ottawa Senators season to get back. We know that the practice for the rookies starts on Tuesday. So Tuesday, Pilsy and I will have everything you need to know what's going on with rookie camp this year. But make sure to check out the Ring of Honor tomorrow on Friday. And then on Monday, we're going to do kind of a roster reset. We made the depth charts. You can kind of get a glimpse of what Steve Staios has done to manipulate this roster this season. Thanks for watching so much. We really appreciate you following on Twitter at Sens Central, subscribing on Locked On Sens. We got a really nice 5-star review the other day on Apple. That really does help the algorithm and helps us. And you can also support us by supporting all the great sponsors that help the show. So have a great rest of your day. We'll have a Ring of Honor for you tomorrow. I'm Ross Levitan, and this has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.